The Nassau Institute proudly presents its inaugural Economics of Liberty lecture series. The lectures were conducted May 2nd and 3rd, 2011 in Nassau, Bahamas by Dr. Richard Ebeling, Professor of Economics at Northwood University in Midland, Michigan, USA. The Nassau Institute is grateful for Dr. Ebeling's dedication and assistance and great teaching ability. A special thank you is extended to the Templeton Foundations for their generous support, without which this event would not have been possible. We also thank the College of the Bahamas and Professor Randy Forbes for hosting this student lecture series in the new Harry C. Moore Library auditorium. Please enjoy Professor Ebeling as he discusses the economics of liberty.
Okay, well, welcome back. We have our final session. The theme of this last one is called The Virtues of Freedom, Restoring a Society of Liberty. I would hope that after spending this time together yesterday and today, you would have been given, through these presentations, a clearer or better understanding of what advocates of individual liberty and the free market mean and imply by their ideas, and the value and the virtues of a society of liberty. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing more precious than freedom. There's nothing more precious than freedom. Each and every one of us is born, and we are unique. There is no one like us. There never will be another one like you. I know that's a cliche that's often said, but you know something? It's absolutely true. You will live your life on this earth one time. The question is, and that the advocate of liberty asks, who should determine the living of your life? Should you have a wide latitude, a wide corridor of self-deciding choices of action, picking the values and purposes that are important to you, the goals and ends that seem worthwhile pursuing to you, to have the ability to select the means and methods to try to achieve those ends as best as you think they're appropriate, efficacious, and desirable and useful? Or shall that power be taken out of your hands and decided for you? In the more extreme cases, as existed and which we talked about in the 20th century, there were some societies that were truly totalitarian. The Soviet Union, Communist China under Mao, Hitler's Nazi Germany, and so on, where literally, to the power and the technological capability of those governments, they truly attempted to control, manipulate, and manage every detail of every person's life. When you see those old World War II movies, and the Gestapo agent in Nazi Germany says, "We know where you live, we're watching you, we know where your parents are, we're watching." I mean, those systems attempted to do that. My wife is Russian. She spent her life in the Soviet Union. That was a society in which there could be the knock at the door in the middle of the night, and the secret police came, and you disappeared. That happened to her grandfather. Long before she was born, her grandfather had been a businessman. There was a short window after the Bolshevik Revolution where the communist regime allowed to remain a small degree of private enterprise. And he was successful at that. He was a successful businessman and entrepreneur, even though he could neither read nor write. He just had that knack of business, you know, sensing how to do things, manage things, figure out what consumers wanted, but he couldn't even read or write. But in 1928 and 1929, Stalin, who then was in full power as the communist dictator of the Soviet Union, decided to end all, even this little private enterprise, and fully nationalize and centrally plan everything. So he was arrested, his property was confiscated, and he was arrested as an enemy of the people, the evil capitalist exploiter. And he was sent to the slave labor camps of Siberia, the Gulag as they called it. And he spent 10 years there. The only reason he got out is because when the Germans invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, they obviously had to start, getting defense industries going in the Soviet economy to fight the Germans. And they needed qualified factory managers. So they started getting people out of the labor camps to work as managers in the state enterprise defense factories. And so he was one of the people who was a capitalist businessman. He knows how to run a factory. So they put him in as a manager. That's what got him out of the camps. And my wife has told me that when she was a little girl, she would go visit him and her grandmother in a town called Rostov-on-Don. It's a town in southern European Russia. A little girl would go visit grandparents during the summer. And she told me that she was afraid of her grandfather. Why was she afraid of her grandfather? Because his face was deformed from the beatings that he had had during the torture sessions. And he talked very loudly. And he talked very loudly because he was deaf in both ears. And why? Because during the interrogation sessions, they hammered nails into his ears. Okay, the world has had cruel and brutal regimes where people had no freedom, where they could do despicable and inhuman things to other human beings. I tried to give you those numbers of the amount of innocent men, women, children killed in the name of building these socialist utopias, these new worlds. That is the absolute form of unfreedom. The absolute form of unfreedom. People were really made merely slaves of the state. You worked at what the government assigned you. You lived in the apartment the government assigned you. You had access to goods and services that the government assigned to you. You had no freedom of choice. Oh, you had one freedom. You could commit suicide. Is that the kind of world that any of us want to live in? The tragedy of it is during those years is that there were people who were enthusiastic about making those utopias, who thought it was good, right, and just for governments to treat other human beings like that, as mere masses of people without faces, to manipulate, control, abuse, destroy, all in the name of some heaven on earth. Luckily, for the most part, those types of regimes are gone. Nobody wants to go marching off to a communist revolution. Nobody wants to goose step to a Nazi parade. Well, that's good. Hopefully we've learned from those tragic mistakes of the past. But it doesn't change the fact that even in our society today, we may not have a total loss of freedom like in those totalitarian societies. But even in our relatively free and politically democratic societies, our freedoms have been narrowed. There are wide areas and aspects of our everyday life where we no longer make choices and decisions, or the types and choices and decisions we're allowed to be made have been straitjacketed and confined. Now, the problem that we face right now is that there are limits to how much the government can continue to do this. All of us are familiar, reading in the papers, the fiscal and debt crises that are facing a variety of countries in Europe. Read the papers about the United States, the Standard & Poor's that rates the credit worthiness of both companies and governments, have threatened to downright the standing of the United States government in terms of its debt. No longer, AAA fully credit worthy, but write them down as less certain that whether the government will be able to tax in the future and actually pay its debt. It's unlikely that's going to happen to the United States tomorrow. But the world is reaching the limit. All the major countries in the world certainly are reaching the limit of a continuation of this constant government largesse, of taxing more, spending